Welcome to the Practice You podcast. My name is Elena Brower. Let's dive into today's conversation regarding life's myriad transitions and how we refine our responses in our relationships, our wellness, our households, our work, and in our practices. You are invited to learn and love and listen with me. Welcome to Practice You. Welcome back to the podcast. I have a new friend with me today. He's an author, speaker, mindset and resilience coach. He's the founder of Supra Mentem, which is a consulting firm specializing in training leaders in peak performance, as well as well-being and sustainable success. His clients include the D.C. Hospital Association, the Maryland Association of Election Officials, and the U.S. Black Chamber of Commerce. This is a productive, caring, compassionate individual. Chazz Scott, I am really honored to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Your latest book is called Success Starts Within, and the subtitle of this book is Achieve Your Potential Through Radical Self-Care. It's seeking to bridge the gap between wellness and accomplishment. And this is a topic on which I'm very focused. I seem to fall off the edge often on both sides, and your simple principle, I think, is really meaningful to me personally, which is that our outward success is only as viable as our inward well-being. And I would love to hear from you about the sort of defining experience first that created the need for this book. Books always come out of some need of your own, and I'm interested to hear that story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate that. So, like most people, I think we either learn from pain or learn from an experience. For me, there was a particular time in my life, it was back in around 2017. I had just graduated with my master's degree, and I was basically doing the work that I had worked so hard for in undergrad and graduate school, working in cybersecurity. And at that point in time, I had moved to Washington, D.C. I had the car I wanted. I had a nice BMW. I had an amazing view looking over the Potomac. And I basically had all of the materialistic items that I thought success was. And yet I was still felt empty inside, depressed, burnt out. And I was working harder in my job, hoping that would change how I would feel internally. And I realized the path that I was on was only making it worse. And it caused me to sort of go on a journey of really self-discovery, who I am, what makes me happy, and what this term that we all sort of hear now, well-being and self-care, actually means. And I got to a point where I started to read every book I could on spirituality, on well-being, anything in personal development, metaphysics. If it was anything about improving the quality of your life, I was looking to read it and digest it, because the path that I was on, it was almost like I was hypnotized in terms of what success and happiness looked like. And I realized that success and happiness is really about your well-being. You know, you being able to show up as your best self is really rooted in your well-being. You being happy is rooted in your well-being. You being able to sort of overcome stress in life and adversity, because life isn't always going to go the way that we would like it to in our circumstances, is really rooted in your well-being. And that was a period of my life where I realized, wait a minute, let me take a step back and really figure out, what does success look like for me? And I realized it was rooted in your well-being, which led me on a path of doing some, I had done some work in the Washington D.C. and Baltimore areas of focusing on mental wellness workshops with underserved youth under our nonprofit Positively Caviar. And then that sort of led me to start doing mindset and resilience coaching with entrepreneurs and leaders. And then further led me to start writing this book to give people simple practices to encourage their well-being.
Thank you so much for your great work. I was interested in talking to you because I too have found this to be true and found myself in a place where money was plenty and everything else was kind of a little bit crumbly. Not crumbling, but just a little frayed at the edges. And the title of chapter 2 really struck me. And this is where I decided I really wanted to talk to you. It's called Guard Your Mind. Chapter 1, of course, we talk about the intersection of wellness and success. We talk about what radical self-care means to you, Chazz Scott, the stop hustling, really look around and see what is around you. What do you need? What do you not need of what's around you? But guard your mind really struck me. And I started to work with this. And it's been a couple of years of me working with this without having the sort of moniker for it. But that is what meditation is. It's a way to guard my mind. And for me, a way to create a certain container for certain thoughts and certain energies and certain intentions that I would like to bring forth. I'd love to talk to you about the tip that you provide in this particular chapter, chapter 2, the Guard Your Mind Before Sleep. If you could give us a little bit of background and context and then tell us about that.
Yeah, no, that's, I almost had to remind myself which tip it was, but, and I think I actually heard this quote first from Ralph Waldo Emerson, stand at the portal of your mind and guard your mind, something to that nature. But I think this is something that we don't think about as we continue to sort of be inundated with the pings, the notifications, the timelines, who we expose ourselves to. And, if you think about it like this, in my background in computer science and cybersecurity, we have this term called garbage in, garbage out, which is if you ingest the database with garbage, you're going to get garbage output. And if you sort of think of it as an analogy as it relates to our minds as well as our bodies, if you give your body junk food, you're not going to have a lot of energy. You're not going to have the creativity, the brain cells to enable to execute on your dreams and do the things that you want to do. And if you think about it with your mind, social media, the people you expose yourselves to, the type of music that you listen to, the type of content that you're digesting, unconsciously has an effect on how we think and how we feel. And we may not realize it as much as we think we do. So, throughout my time period of sort of my self-discovery, I started to sort of do these time frames where I would not pick up my phone as soon as I wake up in the morning. I would have sort of a grounding session, a meditation, or a morning routine. I would come home, cook, and not try to pick up my phone, or go into the bathroom, not pick up my phone. So there were times where I was trying to utilize this, and I started to create this space of, oh, this is Chaz. Oh, this is what I like. Oh, this is how I feel, as opposed to being inundated with other people's thoughts and opinions about what maybe I should be doing in my life and things of that nature. But back to your question about the tip about going to sleep, when I started doing a lot of research on the brain and on the mind, particularly in neuroscience and the subconscious mind, what we don't often realize is, there are periods of consciousness that can have a more of an effect or an impression on our subconscious mind. And those states of consciousness happen to be right before we go to sleep, right when we wake up, during states of meditation. Even prayer can have significant effects on our mind and our subconscious mind. And that's simply because when we slow down our brain waves from beta to alpha to theta to delta, we're able to have much more an effect on who we are, and our subconscious mind literally influences a lot of the unconscious feelings and thoughts that continue to influence us. So the whole tip behind it is, before going to sleep at night, be mindful of what you're digesting. Be mindful of the type of content you expose yourself to. But not only that, do things that reinforce who you want to be. Listen to some relaxing music, listen to some affirmations, do some journaling, do a meditation session, do something that you feel as though is directly correlated to where you want to go and who you want to be. Because during those states of consciousness, as you sort of drift off into sleep, it tends to have a more effect. And a quick example of this is, if you think about it, you go see a scary movie, and that night you begin to fall asleep and you have a dream about that scary movie, right? That's not by accident. Whatever you sort of expose yourselves to throughout that day is impressed into your subconscious mind. So we want to impress information, knowledge, tools, spiritual growth, things that can positively influence us into our sleep and into our subconscious mind.
It's just a really beautiful way of putting it. I really appreciate it. I have a practice of picking up an actual book, not my Kindle, before bed. And the holding of the book and the reading of the words instantly makes me so sleepy. And I can fall asleep within minutes now, just because of that practice. But what you said was really profound just a little while ago. You talked about how important it is to find out what Chaz thinks, to not be consulting the greater universe for my own opinion. And that requires a lot of quiet. And I think that this prompt to guard your mind is, for me, one of the most important. And this is a very important book. Affirming Your Self-Talk, Chapter 4, I wanted to talk about with you. There's one section where you started off, you write, "Do you hear that? Yes, it's you talking to yourself." And even though you're not moving your mouth most of the time, dear listener, you are talking to yourself. And it's really important, and I've said this before and I'll keep saying it until I'm dead, so important to make sure that that conversation is one you want to be having, and not a conversation of deleterious downgrading, down-putting yourself. And you have a few practices, Chaz, to change the inner dialogue and sort of disrupt the negative loops and then affirm what's true. And I would love to hear you speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. When I started doing sort of this personal development journey and spiritual growth, I ran across this term self-talk, and I was like, what is that? I didn't realize I had a voice in my head that is unconsciously affecting how I feel about myself, how I show up in the workplace, how I show up in my relationships. And it was almost like this epiphany or this enlightenment, this stage of enlightenment where I said to myself, oh, there is a voice inside of me that is influencing me either in a positive way or in a negative way. And I know you had touched on this, meditation is such a key tool to observe and really listen in to how you think. Many times we don't hear how we are talking to ourselves. So self-talk is so important. And I think throughout our lives, we don't often take a step back and realize that that voice is influencing us whether we realize it or not. And there are practices to observe it and then sort of reinforce a new conversation in your head. One of the tips that I think it's an exercise at the end of that chapter is called disrupt and affirm, which is very simple. Number one, you become aware of the thought. Number two, you disrupt it. Either, you could use a rubber band on your wrist and say, oh, I have a negative thought, or, something that instantly sort of grabs your attention to make you realize that you are having that negative thought, because that impresses your subconscious mind to recognize more, to pull yourself out the loop. And then the last part of that, number three, is just to affirm yourself. So say a statement that you feel sort of connected to affirm who you want to be and where you want to go. Now, these type of techniques are meant to create sort of what neuroscientists call psychological awareness, right? So we want to create more awareness in how we feel And so we can shift the conversation. We may not get it right all the time, but the most important piece to this is to create awareness, to shift the conversation in your head. And meditation, exercises like these tend to help do that. So you can become more aware. So you can positively influence and encourage yourself to have a new conversation in your head. You can't have a new conversation in your head if you're not aware of it. So you have to become aware of that conversation first, then gently move towards a different route. And it's so interesting, you had mentioned sort of your practice of reading right before going to sleep. Reading, something for me, has been an extremely valuable tool to actually shifting the self-talk in my own head. If have anxiety about the future or regretting the past, if I'm able to focus my thoughts on the words of a page, that actually sort of creates sort of this focus and enlightenment to be in the present, to focus on words in the present and to think about the present as opposed to thinking about the future and the past. So reading is actually an exceptional tool to create awareness, create more focus and clarity in your life as well from a brain standpoint.
Wow. I had no idea. Thank you for that. I wish I could talk about every single chapter, but I'm going to skip ahead to chapter 6 because something in there really spoke to me. Chapter 6's title is Work Toward Ascension. I first want to ask what that means to you exactly, but I want to talk about the section on developing childlike faith. I think this is key. I think this is key to our success as humans in relationship. I think it's key to our success as humans in whatever it is that we do, whether it's money notwithstanding off to the side, whatever it is that we do in our service, in our professional lives. But most importantly, I think it's the most vital practice we've got for getting old, eldering with a modicum of real love in our hearts and care for the people around us. And I wonder, first, part 1, can you talk about what ascension means to you? And then 2, childlike faith.
Oh, yeah. So chapter 6, ascension in particular, working towards ascension, is really about creating awareness again. As you begin to sort of discover yourself, you start to understand what it is that you love to do. What are the goals that you want to pursue? What are your desires? What are your talents? You start to uncover who you are and where you want to go. So this chapter is really highlighting a point that I think is central to the human soul, which is expansion, which is to grow. Stagnation can really make you feel almost depressed, right? So ascension is highlighting an important piece in the mind, body, and soul that expansion and growth are necessary for the human soul. And if you don't feel like you're expanding, it doesn't have to be material items. It doesn't have to be a certain job. It could literally just be your spiritual growth or knowing how to manage your stress throughout the day, right? Success is about progress. Happiness is about progress in your life in any area. So that's what ascension really means as it relates to the book as you start to rise and create more awareness of who you are and where you want to go. So it's all about goal setting and carrying you towards where you want to go. In relation to sort of the childlike faith, this was one of my favorite chapters because it reminds me of a story. We were living in Virginia. I included it in the book. And there was this toy that I had, and I think I had lost a battery or a particular item that was attached to the toy outside in the lawn where we used to live in Virginia. I was with my grandfather, and there was leaves out there during the fall time frame, and I had dropped this particular item that was part of the toy. And supposedly, I said this, my parents and my grandfather keep reminding me that I said this, but I said something to the nature of, Lord, lay my eyes on it. I grew up in Christian faith. I don't think I knew what those words meant back in that day anyways. I probably subconsciously just sort of started to use language like that being in the household. So I said, Lord, lay my eyes on it, and didn't analytically think about it. I didn't, stay stuck. I just said to myself, with faith, I'll find it. Right. So sure enough, right after that, I found it, in between the leaves there. And it's a simple saying, but it's actually a saying that my entire family sort of uses now when they can't find their keys or their wallet. And they'll say, Lord, lay my eyes on it. And it's so funny because they'll actually find the items afterwards, and they're still using it to this day. But that story just sort of highlights the important piece of, I think many of us, especially in this digital age, we're inundated with information, and we have such a analytical mind on, who we want to become, where we want to go. And sometimes life requires that childlike faith, that intuition, that sort of, I don't know why, but it just is. I have to go that way. I don't know what I'm feeling in my body right now, but for some reason, this is the way that I need to go. And a Google search may not confirm it. Your therapist may not confirm it. Your mom may not confirm it. Your parents may not confirm it. But it is something within you that requires childlike faith. And it's something that you can't see. It's something that you can't hear. And maybe that's that small, still voice within. But I think understanding the importance of that and using it daily to support where you're headed in life and your desires is something that I really wanted to highlight throughout this chapter in chapter 6.
It's sweet. You've totally accomplished your goal. I felt affirmed in seeing it and reading it. And I also wanted to make a mental note. I think it's page 16, the difference between what we think success is. This is not just a conversation about professional life, listener. Please don't mistake this. This is about relationships too. But the difference between what we think success is and what success actually looks like. The graphic is super sweet. It's by a lady by the name of Muna. And what we think success is are these really high steps, barely surmountable. One is no breaks. 2 is staying up late, working long hours, little rest. With regards to relationships, it would just be like pushing and forcing and doing all these things, putting yourself out of business with regards to taking care of somebody else. But what success actually is, and this graphic really sweetly displays this, are a series of much smaller, totally surmountable steps, like healthy diet and exercise and meditation and self-care and good sleep and taking actual breaks. And I really appreciated this. In the realm of relationship, I started to think, what does this look like? And if you're in a relationship right now, it looks like, sending your person who you've been with for 10 or 20 or 30 years, like a really sweet text or an unexpected gift or a beautiful poem or planning a date or planning a trip. It looks like kindness. It looks like little tiny incidences of compassion or listening without necessarily offering feedback. And I don't know why. Sometimes Chaz has something just strikes you and you're just like, I don't know why this is great meaning and it's propelling me to think about so many other things. And your book was that for me. And most of the stuff, we've talked about, you and I, in our work for many years, and we've seen it before, but the way that you've put it together and your heart is in this book. And I can't help but direct our listener to your Instagram because your face is just one of the sweetest, kindest faces I've ever seen. Chazz, Chazz, C as in Charlie, Scott. One word, Chazz C. Scott. I'd love to hear a little bit about what gave rise to this graphic and close with how our listener can readily find you and your work and your book.
Oh, thank you so much. Very sweet of you. So the graphic, it's interesting because, I'm talking about the subconscious mind again. Sometimes we get those creative ideas flowing through you. So for me, I actually randomly had this thought in my head. I said, pictures really can convey a message sometimes more than words can. So I actually had like a Post-it note or a little notepad next to me randomly. And I was like, I got to identify some way to actually show sort of what this book is really about in terms of self-care and what success really is. And at first, I think this picture was actually a mountain, a guy climbing a mountain. And we sort of changed it to a staircase here to really highlight the point of how much harder we make it to be in our lives when we feel like we can't take breaks. We feel like we have to work long hours. We feel like we have to do certain things to really achieve happiness, right? We all have a center core of just being happy, but that happiness cannot be pursued. It ensues as a byproduct of well-being. And over the course of our lives, I said it, and I've been sort of hypnotized, most of us have, in terms of what success really is, and this chasing and this going, and we have to accomplish this and we have to do that. I don't think anything is wrong with, working towards something. But through the research that I've done as it relates to neuroscience and positive psychology, when you treat your mind and body well and you fill up your cup, you're able to show up as your best self much more effectively. You're able to have better concentration, better focus. You're able to sort of have that glow and to be happy around your family and to be happy in your relationships. In my course of life, I started to realize that the greatest gift that I can give to my family and friends is for me to be happy. And, engaging in these integrative practices of meditation and self-care and being mindful of what I expose myself to can heighten that sense of awareness so I can be happy. So that's what that graphic is all about, to really show forth what success really is. In reference to the book, if anybody is interested in reading more, it is on Amazon. Success Starts Within, Achieve Your Potential Through Radical Self-Care. It is also on my website at chazscott.com. There is an audiobook that has been released just about 2 months ago if you are interested in listening in to any information that can help improve just the quality of your life.
Thank you so much, Chaz. Your kindness, generosity of spirit and heart is coming through in your work and in your writing, and certainly here in this share. Thank you so very much. And I look forward to hearing from you and watching your rise, your ascent, and hearing how our listener found this episode. I want to encourage you to leave a review, our dear listener, for this episode in particular, or for the show in general. I want to encourage you to support the sponsors who are wonderful, and also to visit with Chaz. What a beauty. Thank you so much for being here, Chaz.
Thanks for having me, Elena.